One of the largest things human beings have ever built was not a wall in China or a pyramid in Egypt. It was a web of earthworks, walls and moats stretching for thousands of miles around a kingdom in West Africa. Most people have never heard of it. That is not an accident. To understand what was taken, you first have to see what was built. So let me show you the city the world chose to forget. For centuries, the Edo people built a kingdom in the forests of what is now southern Nigeria. Not the modern country called Benin next door, but the Kingdom of Benin, ruled from a city of the same name by a sacred king, the Oba. Around their land they raised the walls, banks of packed earth and deep ditches dug entirely by hand, ringing the city and snaking out through the forest to enclose hundreds of towns and villages. By some estimates, the full network ran longer than any other earthwork on the planet, more moved earth than the Great Pyramid, all of it shaped without machines by generations of human hands. Inside the greatest of the walls stood the city itself. Broad, straight avenues, tall timber and clay houses with polished red walls, and at its heart the sprawling palace of the Oba, its pillars sheathed in shining brass. European visitors who reached it wrote home stunned. They described wide streets kept in perfect order, almost no theft, and tall metal lamps burning palm oil that lit the city at night, while many of their own cities back home still lay in darkness. Above all, Benin was a kingdom of metal. In guild workshops, master casters poured molten brass into clay molds, making plaques and heads of breathtaking detail. A cast record of the kingdom's entire history hung along the palace walls. At the center of it all sat the Oba, half king and half divine figure, draped in coral beads, his power woven through every ritual and every casting. For a time, Benin was one of the great powers of West Africa, but by the late 1800s, Britain was carving up Africa, and an independent, wealthy kingdom that controlled its own trade was an obstacle. In 1897, after a British party was killed approaching the city against warning, the empire saw its reason. What followed was deliberate. The expedition stormed the city, drove out the Oba, and set Benin to the torch. The palace, the houses, generations of work, much of it burned. Then came the taking. Thousands of the bronzes and ivories were stripped from the ruins and shipped to Britain, sold to cover the cost of the very expedition that stole them. They scattered into museums and private collections across Europe and America. The walls were left to the forest. The city was rebuilt smaller. The kingdom folded into someone else's empire. And in the textbooks of the conquerors, a sophisticated African civilization simply faded out of the story as if it had never been. But the bronzes never stopped being witnesses. Today, slowly, some are finally being returned to Nigeria, and the name Benin is being spoken again. One of the greatest structures on earth, raised by hand, was nearly erased from memory. Now you know it was there.